Its origins may be obscure, but we all know the riddle, why did the chicken cross the road, and its hackneyed solution to get to the other side. So one might therefore expect that the answer to the question, why did Bnei Yisrael cross the sea, could also be similarly formulated as to get to the other side. Yet Tosfot and Arachin famously tells us, and for good measure even throws in a supportive illustration, that in fact Bnei Yisrael traveled through the water in semicircles, merging on the same side of the Yam Suf as that from which they had entered. While perhaps Bnei Yisrael never completely crossed the sea, another major transformation most certainly was taking place in Parashat Beshalach. The nation that left Egypt in Parashat Bo was qualitatively different than the one that would stand at Mount Sinai in Parashat Yitro. In the familiar words of Midrash Tanchuma, halalu avdei avodah zara, v'halalu avdei avodah zara. The Jews of Egypt are described like their Gentile neighbors as a group of idolaters. So why Bnei Yisrael, when they entered the sea, if they were not drowning in water, they were, according to the Masorah, submerged up to their necks in the depths of spiritual impurity, the 49 Shari Tumah. And yet suddenly, one parsha later, they are at the foot of Har Sinai, purified, sanctified, and assembled to receive the Torah. Chronologically, less than 2 months had elapsed since the great Exodus, which is not a whole lot of time in the context of an indentured existence spanning hundreds of years. And yet they went during this time from being Avadim LaFaro b'Mitzrayim to Avadim LaMakom, servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. According to Rashi's famous comments at the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, it was only in Parashat Bo that Bnei Yisrael first received their inaugural commandment, Kiddush HaChodesh, and yet, suddenly, right after Parashat Beshalach, they are willing and able to receive the entire gamut of the commandments, the Torah of Mitzvot. So what exactly happened in Parashat Beshalach that facilitated this metamorphosis? One way to understand this is to look at the events, the accounts that take place at the beginning of Beshalach, and contrast them to those that take place at the end. Kadosh Baruch Hu explains that that God did not leave Bnei Yisrael through the land of the Plishtim, lest the Jewish nation reconsider upon seeing war and return to Egypt. Though they were armed, chamushim, the mere sight of military activity anywhere in the vicinity would be enough to unnerve them and have them do an about-face and head back to Egypt. They probably would have been chosrei me'er kemelchama, would have had an exemption from participating in warfare. And so an indirect and obscure route was necessary to prevent such a retreat that could ultimately undermine the entire Exodus and all the events that led up to it. Even when Pharaoh finally catches up to them and arrives on the sea, Moshe declares, Hityatzvuru at Yeshuat Hashem. Hityatzvu, stay fixed in place, with a connotation of paralysis, like the Netziv Melach, the pillar of salt that was Lot's wife. Another famous verse, Hashem yilachem lachem v'atem tachrishun. God will do the fighting. You, the Jewish people, just remain silent. Don't do anything else for that matter. Look what happens at the end of Parashat Beshalach. This time it's not just something that's in full view of Bnei Yisrael, but involves Bnei Yisrael. And you might have expected that here too they would have been told to get out of the way. And yet Moshe instructs Yoshua, find men, mortal men, will lead the military effort. Yes, there's a mission in Rosh Hashanah. Is it really the hands of Moshe or any other physical action that really makes a difference in the warfare? Maybe not. Maybe it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Siyata Deshmaya, is only going to be invoked after the human initiative. There's another famous medrash that says that even though it was Moshe's outstretched arm that split the sea, Medrash points out that somebody, and it's usually identified as Nachshon ben Aminadav, there are other accounts as well, that someone would have to jump in. Those days in Egypt, when the Jews were told, Vatem lo teitzu ish, Mipetach beito ad boker, don't you dare leave your house during the plague. Everyone should sit home passively and wait for it to be over. All of a sudden, it's those same Bnei Yisrael that are asked to engage in warfare. Though the Torah was a gift from above and will forever be invested with an unparalleled degree of sanctity, the human role in the transmission of Torah is paramount. Lo b'shamayim hi, that the Torah is not in heaven, does not merely relate to the decision process of psak halacha, but rather to the entire enterprise of Talmud Torah. And if Bnei Yisrael were going to understand that the continuum of Torah in this world, the spiritual endeavor unleashed in Parashat Yitro, depended on them, and not just on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then this lesson was best realized by first appreciating their role in the more mundane challenges of the physical survival in Parashat Beshalach. The proverbial chicken may have crossed the road simply to get to the other side. But for Bnei Yisrael and Beshalach, there's a lot more at work as they traveled from the plains of Egypt to the mountain of Sinai. While the waters of Yam Suf may have been palpably prohibitive, little did the Jews know how much was in store for them after they would traverse the sea. The experience in Beshalach was an eye-opener, not only in terms of an unrivaled revelation of God's wonders, but also the collective transformation of the nation that would enable them to properly become the people of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.